Hello students. Today we are going to discuss about respiration, biology, second lesson, 10th class. Right? So, what is respiration? It is the process from inhalation of air to the use of oxygen in cells. How we are breathing in air and how oxygen is taken by our body and how it is using. So that whole comes under respiration process. Right? So here first topic, respiration. In respiration, steps in respiration. Right? So, see the block diagram here. First, we breathe in through our nose, right? So, after breathing air, where it is going, air moves into the lungs and out of the lungs. Right? From the lungs, it reaches into the blood, right? So, if what is happening in the lungs, exchanges gaseous exchange at lungs level, right? We will discuss what is all, right? Exchange of gaseous between alveoli and blood. Alveoli is the last part of the lungs, right, where gaseous exchange means oxygen combined with the blood and from the blood carbon dioxide comes into the alveoli, right? Next, gas transport after oxygen mixing with the blood, so it should go all the parts of our body, right? All the tissues use this oxygen continuously, right? See here, transport of oxygen from blood capillaries of alveoli to body cells and return of carbon dioxide. So here oxygen is transported with from using blood, right, to all parts of our body, where cells take the oxygen, they use continuously oxygen and release carbon dioxide. Again this carbon dioxide mix with the blood, right? Here what is happening, gas exchange at tissue level, exchanging of oxygen from blood into the cells and carbon dioxide from cells into blood, exchanging of oxygen from blood to the cells. These cells are taking oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide from the cells into the blood. Next, last level of respiration is cellular respiration. Using oxygen in cells, cell processes to produce carbon dioxide, water and release energy to be used for the life processes. Okay, so whenever it is means after using our oxygen, so that process is called oxidation, right? So at that time it releases energy which is used by our body. Okay, right. Here we have one simple lab activity is that, so presence of carbon dioxide actually, uh, sim- here we have to take two test tubes which are filled with the lime water used to test the uh, presence of carbon dioxide, right? So in this picture they are sending out breathe out air into the lime water, right? So for first beaker we have to discuss about only first beaker, I am talking about this only, right? So breathe out air from that person is coming into this lime water. What is happening, this test tube is closed, okay, right? So this lime water turns into milky white which shows the presence of carbon dioxide. So when we breathing out, that air contains more percentage of carbon dioxide. Suppose if you are sending air from the external environment using syringe into this, what will happen? So here we know, so we are sending atmospheric air into this test tube. So one is breathe out air, so this is breathe out air. So here air coming from atmosphere, okay, right? Both the gases will have carbon dioxide in them. So atmosphere also contains some percentage of carbon dioxide in that. Breathe out also contains different gases, right? So if you compare these two test tubes, what will happen? So this breathe out air test tube turns more milky white when you compared with this atmospheric, where we are sending atmosphere air, right? So it turns into milky white but not that much But when you compare these two, this test tube converts this lime water turns into more milky white when you compare it with the second test tube where it is reacting with atmospheric air, right? So here if you observe also, walls of the test tube will have some, it forms of water droplets. What it is indicating? So whenever you are breathing air outside, that air also contains some water vapor, right? So here we have some questions. What does the experiment indicate? So this experiment indicate that to test the presence of carbon dioxide which is exhaled during in respiration, right? Second question, which gas turns lime water more milky? Breathe out air. Breathe out air turns lime water more milky, right? Which gas do you think that it might be present in greater quantities in the air we breathe out as compared to air around us? Obviously, it's carbon dioxide answer. Okay. Next, we are also aware that fact where water vapor deposits on a mirror if we breathe out in it. So from where it is coming? Breathe out air also contains water vapor, right? So during respiration it is releasing water vapor also, right? So next topic, pathway of air, right? Pathway of air. So respiration means we have to discuss about our respiratory system. So it starts from nasal cavity, right? Nasal cavity. Nostrils first, nasal cavity, nostrils. So these are the two whole structures what we are seeing from outside, right? So from this nostrils, air enters into the body, right? When air entering in our through the nose, right? So it enters into the nasal cavity. So here if you observe your nasal cavity by touching also you can feel that. So by seeing we find that some hair structures are found in that nasal cavity, and if you touch it is always somewhat uh, it contains water like structure in that, right? Mucus, right? So why, what is the purpose of this air and that water? Okay, right? Air is filtered most of the surface of the lining of the nasal cavity and hair growing. So what is the purpose of this hair? So it removes dust particles, right? So to remove it helps to remove the dust particles, and in addition, so inhaled air passing through the nasal cavity, its temperature is brought up very close to our body temperature, and also it moisten our breath in air, right? It brings, if it is more hot it cools down, if it is very cool it brings it increases its temperature like that. Okay, so its temperature is brought close to the body and it takes up water vapor so that it becomes more moist than before. From the nasal cavity it is taking water vapor to become more moisture, right? Then air travels through the pharynx, right? Next, this warm and moistening goes into this common passage. It is common passage for, see here if you observe also, for whatever food we are eating, it is should pass through pharynx. Whatever air we breathe in, that also passes through the pharynx. So it is common passage for both air and food, right? So it is common passage of digestive and respiratory system. Epiglottis, in the pharynx you find epiglottis, uh, flap-like structure, muscular wall, controls movement of food and air towards their respective passages. So it is a flap-like structure with uh, it, whenever you are breathing in, it closes your food pipe, right? Whenever you are swallowing something, it closes your windpipe. So it's muscular tissue which regulates your movement of air and food. Next, air enters into the larynx. So here the stiff box contains our vocal cord, When air passes out of lungs and over the vocal cords, it causes them to vibrate. So we know vocal cord produces sound, right? So in the larynx, vocal cord present. We see vocal cord is present in the larynx, so it produces sound on the basis of our speech, right? Next, then air enters into this trachea. If you touch your throat, so you'll find these muscle like structures which are in circular shape, right? So windpipe channeling to air to lungs. Touch your throat to feel the tube like structure. So it is made up of cartilage. Cartilage is a soft tissue, right? It's one type of bone, soft bone. It is soft bone, right? One type of connective tissue, very strong. Then air passes into the bronchus, bronchi, bronchioles, then into the lungs. So these are the air, giving space to the air to pass into the each lungs. So here trachea divide into bronchi. So at its lower end, trachea or windpipe divides into two bronchi, one leading to each lung, right? Next, next, bronchioles. Bronchi is further divided into smaller branches is called bronchioles. See, this bronchi splits into smaller branches, giving way to the air to pass through it. So those are called bronchioles. Then last part of your bronchioles is alveoli. Lungs last part is alveoli, where bronchus again divides, and then it forms cluster like air sac structures. Those are called alveoli. These alveoli are surrounded by numerous blood vessels, right, which continuously take oxygen and gives out carbon dioxide. From it, if you see the structure of your alveoli, these are having single cell thickness, which the blood vessels around these alveoli also will have single cell thickness, which helps for the continuous diffusion, right? Next, from this cell, these finally terminate in clusters of air sacs called alveoli in the lungs, which are small and numerous. Gaseous exchange takes place here. Right, what is gaseous exchange? So from the lungs, air enters into the blood. Right, from the blood, carbon dioxide enters into alveoli, then goes back to the reverse process and comes out of our body through the nostrils. Right, blood carries next from the alveoli. Blood carries oxygen, and each and every cell of the body collects CO2 from them. Okay, right. Next, so it is pathway of air. So what are the main parts? Nostrils, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx. So in the pharynx we find epiglottis, larynx, vocal cord. And the trachea, it's a smooth bone structure which is giving path to the air. Then this trachea divides into two bronchi, right, bronchus. Then it splits into bronchioles. Then end part of your lungs is alveoli, which helps for diffusion of gaseous exchange also takes place here, right? From the alveoli, oxygen enters into the blood. From the blood, it takes carbon dioxide, then reverse path takes way here for the carbon dioxide. Bronchioles, bronchi, trachea, larynx, pharynx, then nostrils. So nasal cavity, then nostrils, and it enters into the atmosphere. That CO2. CO2 pass out like this, right? So in pharynx we find uh, epiglottis, one structure epiglottis, which regulates the movement of food and air, right? So next we have mechanism of diaphragm, right? If you see your lung structure, your lungs are protected by rib cage. Rib cage not only protecting your lungs, it is also protecting your heart also. Right, just left to your body, we are having heart here. This is your heart. Right. So if you observe, your left lung is having somewhat less smaller when you compare with your right lung. Why? Because it is giving space to the heart. Okay. Next, if you see bottom of your lungs, here we have one muscular tissue that is called diaphragm. This one, right? This is continuous tissue, muscular tissue, somewhat thick, which is controlled by medulla oblongata of your brain, right? Which all involuntary movements are controlled by medulla oblongata. Here also it is also controlled by that part, right? So it is in dome shape. Okay. So rib cage is protected, protects your lungs and heart. Okay. What is happening during respiration? We'll see. This is your diaphragm. Okay. So above it is we are having two lungs like this. So here we have heart, right? So when it is in the shape of dome, and sometimes it is in the shape of dome shape, and then it comes to, sometimes you find it as flattened, right? Whenever it is flattened, right? So lung space is increased, which decreases the air pressure. Okay. So because of difference of that air pressure, air enters from the outside to this lungs. So it's a muscular tissue. It comes into one time dome shape, one time, second time it flattens, again comes to dome shape, then it comes to flatten. So it goes on like this, right? So whenever it is flattened, the space by the lungs is increased. Space in the lungs is increased, and the pressure in the lungs is somewhat less when you compare with the outside pressure. Then air rushes into your lungs. Then next, whenever it is uh, comes to dome shape, immediately it pushes whatever air present in the air lungs to the outside, right? So whenever it is flattened, air comes to inside because of uh, pressure difference in the air. Then whenever it is dome shape, it pushes out air from the lungs to external environment, right? So the chest wall is made up of ribs, muscles, and skin. The ribs are attached to our spinal cord at an angle, right? We know this one. When we inhale, chest wall moves up and expands. This causes increase in volume of the chest cavity. But actual thing is happening by the, everything is done by this diaphragm only. So when it is flattened, volume of the lungs increases and decreasing the air pressure within the lungs. So because of this, external air pressure is now high, it is low, then air rushes into the lungs, right? Whenever it is uh, comes into dome shape, air pushed out of the lungs through into the external atmosphere, right? So it's a continuous process. Okay. So here we have to imagine this as the floor of the your chest cavity. Below the chest we have stomach, and if you, here we will find liver, you'll find liver legs. Okay. So this cavity we call it as abdominal cavity. This is chest cavity or thoracic cavity also we can say, right? So when diaphragm is relaxed, when we breathe out, its shape is in the shape of dome, right? So whenever it in the shape of dome, the diaphragm is in the shape of dome. This state we call it as relax. Relax means we are sending breathe out, breathing, we are sending air outside, that is called breathe out stage, right? So that stage is called relaxing stage whenever you are breathing in, right? So when it is flattened, air comes into the lungs, right? So When diaphragm contracts during inhalation, it flattens. So when it is contracting, it flattens out a bit of. So what is happening after flattening? So volume is increased because of air pressure difference. So air comes into the lungs. So when diaphragm flattens, the volume of chest cavity is increased, its internal pressure decreases, and air from the outside reaches into the lungs. This is called inspiration or inhalation. Okay. Then the reverse occurs, the chest wall is lowered and moves inward. The diaphragm relaxes and assumes it in dome shape. These changes increase in the pressure on lungs. Their elastic tissue contracts and squeezes the air out through the nose to the external atmosphere. This is called expiration. Inhalation, expiration. We know these two words, and everything done by your diaphragm. When it is flattened, inhalation takes place. When it is in the dome shape, exhalation takes place. Right. Next we have one more new topic: gaseous exchange from alveoli to capillaries. Gaseous exchange means carbon dioxide enters into lungs, and from the alveoli, oxygen enters into the blood vessels. Right? Gaseous exchange takes place within the lungs by diffusion from the alveoli to blood capillaries and vice versa. Carbon dioxide in the blood is exchanged for oxygen in the alveoli. These tiny air sacs in the lungs are numerous and only one cell thick. They are surrounded by capillaries that are also one cell thick, blood dark red. See here. So what? So if you think only, if you are taking only one air sac of your alveoli, only one part is one structure. So if it is surrounded by some blood vessels, only they are showing only one blood. So many are surrounded this, only here we are taking only one blood vessel. See here, in atmosphere you are having 21 percentage of oxygen, right? 0.04 percentage of CO2. So suppose if you are thinking your blood vessel containing 16 percentage of oxygen, right? 0.4 percentage of CO2 in the blood vessels. This is about CO2. This is oxygen in the blood vessel. Right? Here 21 percentage of oxygen present in our alveoli right now, and at 16 percentage present in the blood capillaries. So what happens? See here, concentration of oxygen is more here when you compare with the percentage of your oxygen in the blood vessels. So there is a difference between the concentrations. We know what is diffusion. Particles move from high concentration to low concentration, right? So immediately oxygen from the alveoli enters into the blood, and it combines with the hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. Oxyhemoglobin, right? And if you take carbon dioxide, oxygen finished now. So here high concentration to low concentration. This side, oxygen is coming in this way because of high concentration to low concentration means diffusion. Next here we have in our blood vessels it is 0.4. In atmospheric air it is 0.04, right? So which is more concentrated? In the blood we are having more percentage of carbon dioxide than alveoli. What happens here? From the blood vessels, carbon dioxide uh, comes into the alveoli. So it is in the form of bicarbonate in the blood. So from whenever it reaches your alveoli, right? So it enters into the alveoli, then to the bronchioles, bronchus, trachea, larynx, pharynx, then nasal cavity, nostrils, like that. It takes reverse path, right? So main function happens through the process called diffusion only. So diffusion, bright red. Next we have transportation of gases. So how transportation of gases taking place? So just now as we discussed, Whenever it is combining with oxygen, right? So it forms oxyhemoglobin, right? Now it moves in the form of oxyhemoglobin throughout the body, throughout the body. When after diffusion, oxygen combine with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin, right? So now blood circulates throughout the body. Every part, every cell of our body reached by blood capillaries carry all the blood to all parts of our body. So each and every cell get this oxygen, right? Whenever it is reaching any tissue or cell, right? This hemoglobin split, uh, oxyhemoglobin again splits into hemoglobin and oxygen, right? This oxyhemoglobin splits into hemoglobin and four molecules of oxygen. Now this oxygen is used by the our cells in our body, right? Then only we'll get energy, right? What if we, even though you are taking food, we need oxygen to get the energy. When oxygen is present in the air within the normal limits, almost all of it is carried in the blood by binding hemoglobin, a protein. It is a type of protein present in our blood, right? Present in the blood cells. Oxygen diffused in the blood. It rapidly combines with the hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. Not only hemoglobin can combine with oxygen, but reverse can also happen to yield a molecule of hemoglobin and oxygen. This oxyhemoglobin splits into hemoglobin and oxygen, right? What is happening after uh, oxygen is taken by the cells in our body, right? So our cells continuously use this oxygen and they release carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is usually transported as bicarbonate, while some amount of it combines with the hemoglobin and rest is dissolved in blood plasma. So it is transported as bicarbonate in the blood. So it some of its percentage is dissolved in the plasma and some combines with the hemoglobin. That is the story of your transportation of gases. Next, we have gaseous exchange. Same heading we have for here, right? So for this topic also we have gaseous exchange. Alveoli to capillaries. What is happening in so it's happen in our lungs, right? Here also gaseous exchange takes place. So this is about capillaries to cells and back. So these blood capillaries takes oxygen to all the cells, right, in our body. And what is happening? So that gaseous exchange now. So in this capillaries over tissues, hemoglobin meets a very different environment. The tissue cells are continuously uses oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. So whenever blood reaches these cells, so generally oxygen combines with hemoglobin, it flow as oxyhemoglobin. Whenever it is reaching cells, it splits into hemoglobin and oxygen. This oxygen is taken by the cells and it releases carbon dioxide, right? So it is carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate. So some of it is dissolved in the plasma and some of it is mixed with the hemoglobin. So it might be only one third of concentration of oxygen is quite low in them. It might be only one third of in the lungs, as the concentration of oxygen is low where in the cells. Oxyhemoglobin releases oxygen molecule that enters the cells. In the reactions that occurs within the cells in our bodies, carbon dioxide and water are produced. Energy is released to be used up for different purposes, right? Next topic, cellular respiration. Cellular respiration. So term cellular respiration refers to the pathway by which cell release energy. The cellular respiration means how the cells are taking oxygen, how they are releasing energy. So that comes under cellular respiration. Everything, it is at the level of cell, right? So every living cell need oxygen and energy to carry out their cellular respiration. So all living cells must be carry out cellular respiration. So it can be happen in the presence of oxygen, that is called Aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration. Or in the absence of it, it is called anaerobic respiration. So it is in two forms. It is aerobic respiration means respiration takes in the place of oxygen, right? So it happens in the absence of oxygen. It is called anaerobic respiration. In animals, anaerobic respiration leads to formation of lactic acid from the glucose. What from where we are getting this glucose? So generally, whatever we are taking food, right? So that here we are considering it as glucose. Anaerobic respiration, few ATP molecules are produced. So generally, we know there are two types of respiration processes, that is uh, absence or low amount of oxygen or presence of oxygen. So presence of oxygen means, so what is happening before that? So glucose, we know glucose formula, right? C6H12O6. Here we are having 6 carbon molecules. So that splits into 3 carbon compound, that is called pyruvate. Pyruvate means it's a 3 carbon compound. So how it is splitting? 6. C6 is splitting into 3 carbon compound, C3 like that, right? And energy. So this process is called glycolysis. Glucose is converted into pyruvate. What is pyruvate? Pyruvate is a 3 carbon compound, right? This process is called glycolysis, right? Next, absence and the presence of oxygen. We see first presence of oxygen. What is it is releasing after respiration process? After a series of steps, it releases carbon dioxide, water vapor and energy. So carbon dioxide enters into the external atmosphere, okay, then water vapor also into the atmosphere, and some of it is used by our body. Then energy we know where we have for every uh, purpose we are using this energy. So to do any work we need energy, that is comes like this, okay. So next, when there is low amount of oxygen or absence of oxygen, even though it is having very less amount of oxygen, there also it releases energy, that called anaerobic respiration or fermentation. So if it is take in the wherever you suppose if you are taking lactobacillus bacteria, right? Lactobacillus bacteria, it is releases lactic acid and energy. One type of anaerobic respiration takes place in lactobacillus bacteria. Then next, if you take example yeast, what it is releasing it in as end products? Ethanol, CO2 and energy, right? So this is your block diagram of respiration, anaerobic respiration. Gas is most Glucose is most commonly used sugar for deriving energy in plants and animals. All these organisms, glucose oxidized in two stages. In first stage, it is converted into two molecule of pyruvic acid. In the second stage of oxygen is available, pyruvic acid is oxidized to CO2, water, large amount of energy. So whenever pyruvic acid is combines with oxygen, it releases energy plus carbon dioxide and water. Right. If oxygen is inadequate or not utilized, pyruvic acid is converted into ethanol. This is called fermentation. Where? In the yeast. In some bacteria, lactic acid is formed and very little amount of energy is released, right, when it is very low presence of oxygen, right. So if it is here abundant of oxygen is available, at that time pyruvic acid react with the oxygen, that means oxidized, it releases carbon dioxide, water and energy. So this is your block diagram of anaerobic respiration, right. Next we have one more topic, that is lab activity to test for production of heat and CO2 under anaerobic respiration. So is really we are getting energy, is it releasing carbon dioxide during anaerobic respiration? Is anaerobic really taking place here, right? So Right. So take a jar. Uh, in this we have to add glucose solution, right? For this glucose solution, you have to add yeast in this glucose solution, right? So wild yeast are normally found on growing skins of fruits like grapes and apples, from which they derive their food supplies. Now, before adding, here what we have to do. So every liquid having is it water or some water content liquids will have dissolved oxygen in it. Any water will have dissolved oxygen in that. So to remove that, what we have to do. So now I first what I did here, I added only glucose solution now into this test tube. Okay, right. To remove the dissolved oxygen, what we have to do, heat this jar for 1 minute, then 1 minute or 2 minutes, cool it without shaking it. Now, so to stop the flow of oxygen, again after cooling down, may external from the external environment, oxygen enters into this water. To stop that, I am pouring 1 centimeter layer of liquid paraffin, which stops the flow of oxygen into that. Still, if you want to check your is there any oxygen in this liquid, to test that we have one chemical that is dicyn green solution to this yeast suspension before you pour paraffin liquid. So why we are using, to test the presence of oxygen in this liquid, right? So if it is turning into pink, oxygen in, so this dicyn green or Janus B green solution, Janus green B solution, if you are adding to this yeast solution, if it is turning into pink, so what it is indicating, in short supply of oxygen. Okay, now add yeast to this, right? Pour liquid paraffin to stop the flow of oxygen, then leave it for some time. So close this jar with the rubber cork which are having two holes, one to insert your thermometer and the second to insert your delivery tube. So the second end of delivery tube is sent to the lime water, right, in the another test tube. Okay, right. Next, lime water is used to test the presence of carbon dioxide. We know this one. So what we did for once again. So take glucose solution, right? Heat it for 1 minute or 2 minutes. Cool it down without shaking. Cool it down without shaking. Right. To stop the flow, reverse flow of oxygen, water, air from the atmosphere, oxygen may re-enter into this water, right? Glucose solution. So what we are pouring, liquid paraffin. So before that, if you want to check any dissolved oxygen present in this, what we have to do, to check that we have to take one chemical, dicyn green. If you add dicyn green to this solution, it turns into pink. It turns into pink when there is shortage of oxygen. If there is no oxygen or shortage of oxygen, it turns into pink. Then pour your, add yeast to this glucose solution, then pour liquid paraffin to stop the reverse flow of oxygen. Then insert your thermometer, insert your delivery tube through the rubber cork. Second end of delivery tube is sent to the lime water. Leave it for some time. So you should take recording of your thermometer. Okay, right. So after some time it releases yeast, even though there is no or shortage of oxygen, anaerobic respiration takes place in the yeast, right? So if you observe your recordings of your thermometer, temperature levels increases. When temperature level increases, so during respiration we find some heat energy also released. Okay, and it releases carbon dioxide which comes out of the liquid and goes through the delivery tube into the lime water, where this lime water turns into milky white, right? So this is our lab activity to test the production of heat and CO2 under anaerobic respiration. So the released carbon dioxide passes through the tube and turns lime water milky. So we can also observe the changes in the temperature also during the process, right? Next one, evolution gaseous exchange system. Evolution gaseous exchange system. One second. So evolution means how breathing process is evolved from lower organisms to higher organism. Right? Lower organisms means we have to consider here single cell living organisms like unicellular organisms like amoeba, hydra, planaria. Right? All this comes under single cell organisms. Right. So in lower organisms like amoeba and hydra, everything happens through the process of simple diffusion. Simple diffusion, right? Next, one more type of respiration is tracheal respiration. So you'll simple diffusion with no special respiratory organs occur. Organs diffusion. So examples unicellular, multicellular, unicellular organisms like amoeba, hydra. Tracheal respiration, respiratory organs are trachea only. So we find this in cockroach. Cockroach, say what happens in cockroach? So in our body, trachea splits into bronchi, bronchia, then alveoli, right? But in cockroach, this trachea spreads throughout the body, cockroach body. Each and every part of, suppose if you see cockroach, right? So whenever air enters into its body, trachea reaches every part of its body, right? So it takes oxygen to direct air, not oxygen, it takes entire air to each and every cell, right? There it diffusion takes place direct to the cells. Okay, so we see this in cockroach. Cockroach, if you see cockroach blood, it is in white color. So there is it, it is not in red color because of absence of hemoglobin. Next, cutaneous respiration. Respiratory organs are skin, earthworms, leech and frogs. What is how it is taken? So if it is respiring through skin, that is called cutaneous respiration. Examples examples are earthworms and leech. Next, bronchial or gill respiration. Gills we find out in fishes, right? Next, pulmonary respiration, lungs. Pulmonary respiration means, so if you are breathing through lungs, that type of respiration is called pulmonary respiration. All developed organisms breathe through lungs only. All terrestrial animals like reptiles, aves, mammals, and water living animals like crocodile and dolphins also comes under this category. What? Pulmonary respiration. So what are the types of respiration we have? Simple diffusion, so no special organs were available here. Unicellular organisms are example for this. Next, tracheal respiration, organ is trachea. So insects like cockroaches, we see this type of respiration. Cutaneous respiration means respiration through skin. So earthworm is example. Branchial or gill respiration, uh, gills are the organs. We see this one in fish. Next, pulmonary respiration means breathing with the lungs is called pulmonary respiration. Okay. Next, we have simple lab activity, that is CO2 evolved in respiration. So here we need some sprouts, right? So we know how to get sprouts, right? If you soak your seeds in a jar in water for one night, so next day you will find seeds, right? So pour these seeds in the glass jar, right? Close it with the cork before closing. take a small beaker, pouring in that small beaker, add some lime water, leave it for some time without disturbing it. So sprouts will not do photosynthesis at that time, so only they germinate, means here they respire, means they take oxygen from the external atmosphere for their growth to get energy, and it releases carbon dioxide during this process. So this released carbon dioxide releases CO2, right? The CO2 mixes reacted with this lime water and turning into milky white. So after some time you see that lime water turns into milky white. When it is turns into milky white, when it reacts with the carbon dioxide. From where we are getting that carbon dioxide? So this sprouts releases carbon dioxide during their respiration, right? So from this plants also take oxygen for their very little amount of oxygen they use for their growth, and they release energy. Okay, next we have one more simple lab activity is that heat is evolved during respiration. Heat is evolved during respiration. Next, take a jar, pour some sprouts in the jar, close the jar with cork. Okay, close it with rubber cork, thermometer, insert thermometer and close the container. Okay, after some time you observe that there is increase in the level of this thermometer, which shows the release of heat energy, which shows the release of heat energy during respiration. Okay, next we have balanced equation of respiration. This, right, glucose combines with oxygen to release 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water and energy. C6H12O6 is star glucose and oxygen. Okay, here we have to discuss the differences between respiration and combustion. So differences between oxidation and combustion. Oxidation of glucose molecule is known as respiration. Burning of organic substances is known as combustion. So it is highly controlled process. Even though it is where respiration takes place in the body, our body is filled with water. 70% of our body is with water, right? So still it is releasing energy. It is uncontrolled process. Intermediate products are formed. Intermediate products are not formed, right? External energy is not required to come to get the heat energy, to release some energy. External energy is not required, external energy is required, right? To burn something we need something, right? So to heat energy we need to burn something. Occurs in presence of water, occurs in absence of water. Energy is released and stored in the form of ATP molecule. Energy is not stored and released at once into the atmosphere in the form of heat. Next, it is a biological process. It is non-biological process. No charring of sugars, right? Energy is released in several steps. Energy is released at once, so it takes in several steps. So these are the differences between combustion and respiration. So from this activity you'll get that question. So this is last lab activity. CO2 byproduct of energy release. So whenever you are burning, so here we are burning CO2, glucose. To burn this we need heat energy, external heat energy we are taking, right? So what it is releasing, carbon dioxide it is releasing, and also heat energy is released from this glucose. So CO2 combines with lime water, turns into milky white. But glucose must be burnt at high temperature in the laboratory to liberate energy. It happened at our cells. All cells would be burnt. Once glucose starts burning, we cannot stop the process easily. But living cells are able to exercise control overshot of burning of glucose in the presence of oxygen. Water normally stops the combustion from taking place while cells contain a lot of water and respiration still goes on. So with this your lesson completed.